My name is Mike Padilla. I'm a project manager with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers in Chicago, and I am the project manager for the Great Lakes Coastal Resiliency Study. And we are here today to talk to you about the shared vision for the study. Uh, when a group of people are together and they're working on a common objective, it's very useful to make sure that everybody has a shared vision of the outcome of their work and their endeavors. And so we want to understand what our vision is for resiliency on the Great Lakes coast. And we'll talk a lot more about that. But I wanted to mention to everybody that we are recording this meeting, and so it will be made available on our website. Our website is www.lrd.usace.army.mil. That's www.lrd, Lakes and Rivers Division, lrd.usace, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, .army.mil, and that's / GLCRS, Great Lakes Coastal Resiliency Study. This is going to be the first of many outreach and partnering opportunities for the general public that will occur over the next few years as this study takes shape and moves towards a collaborative conclusion. When you think about resiliency along our coast, it's a shared responsibility, and we want to start thinking in that way. And it requires that we all work together to respond to changing future conditions. I know people are concerned about climate change. What does that mean for the Great Lakes? Well, this study is going to kind of look into that a little bit, and when it comes to resiliency for the future. And then I wanted to mention we're going to be responding to questions at a certain question and answer time, but I think I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Akila Martin, who is a facilitator for today's meeting, and she will explain a little bit more about the Zoom features, including question and answer for questions and comments. Akila.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mike. Welcome, everyone. I hope you're very well. I am Dr. Akila Martin, daughter to Laurel and James Martin. As Mike said, I am serving as a facilitator for the Great Lakes Coastal Resiliency Shared Vision public meetings, along with my co-host from the Buffalo District, Madeline Dewey, who you will see posting in the chat. So please turn your attention to the chat if you can throughout the meeting so that you will not miss out on any great information. So, if you're in the Zoom platform now with us today, thank you so much. We welcome you. If you turn your gaze down to the bottom of your screen, you'll see some toggles that Zoom offers. I want to call your attention to the first one, which is the Q&A. It says Q&A, and it has two call-out figures on top of the Q&A. We encourage you, we invite you to ask us any questions. We want you to use this Q&A to ask all questions. Please do not put questions in the chat because they may get lost. We want to ensure that we can get to your question and answer it appropriately. There are several ways that you can ask a question. You can do it anonymously as shown on the screen by sending it privately. You can send me, Akila, and or Madeline a direct message. That way it's only on our eyes and we'll be able to state the question for you during the question and answer session. If you have any comments or input or feedback, please use the chat feature, and that toggle button is to the right of the Q&A. It has a call out button at the top and it says chat. Click on that, and that way you can give us feedback, input, and your comments. And also you'll see my co-host and facilitator Madeline Dewey placing many things in the chat. Last thing we want to call your attention to is the show captions. That is to the right of chat. It has a CC in a box atop it, and it says show captions. If you click on that, you can view a full transcript of what is being said verbally during our meeting today. I'll hold for a few seconds just in case people want to ask questions in the Q&A or place comments in the chat. Thank you so much, and we want to thank Argonne National Laboratory for providing this Zoom platform for us today. So thank you so much, Argonne, and over to you, Mike. Welcome.
Thanks, Akila. So yeah, folks, a little bit about the agenda for today. So the purpose of this briefing is to provide you all with background and context for the study and to initiate, a collaborative outreach program with the general public by bringing you, as stakeholders to the table with our study team as we move forward. Today, we are with the state of Wisconsin, and they're our hosts for today, and they are cost sharing this study with us. And I'll tell you more a little bit about that cost share. They're cost sharing this along with the 7 Great Lakes states, the other 7 Great Lakes states. We'll introduce you as we go along to some of the key members of our project delivery team, as we walk through some of the, the elements of the study. And after the briefing, we're looking forward to your feedback and input to help us move this study forward, and especially to work on development of a shared vision statement. And again, we'll get into all that stuff. So the agenda really is, the welcomes here this morning. We're going to do an icebreaker exercise that it has to do with the Great Lakes. The state of Wisconsin, our partners, will then make some opening remarks and make a presentation about their organization and their mission. Then we'll tell you basically about the Great Lakes Coastal Resiliency Study, the study background and the scope of the study. We'll talk a little bit about that shared vision statement. We'll talk about the major study products, the products that we expect to produce from this study. And then we're going to talk about the basin-wide analysis, because that's really what this study is all about. We're doing an analysis of the entire Great Lakes Basin when it comes to look for vulnerabilities and to find a way to make the Great Lakes more resilient in the face of those vulnerabilities. Then we're going to have plenty of time for questions and answers, and we'll use that feature that Dr. Martin mentioned a few minutes ago. And then we'll tell you a little bit about the next steps of the project going forward. So with that, I would like to turn it back over to Dr. Martin. She's going to tell us a little bit about the meeting touchstones, and shared expectations for the meeting. Akila?
Yes, thank you so much, Mike, and welcome again. So we wanted to go over how we'd like to share space with you today, and we thank you again. We welcome you to this space. And so in order for us to have a successful and intentional meeting, we invite you to be 100% present, prepared, extending, and presuming welcome. I've used the word welcome several times. We welcome you. We welcome your questions. We welcome your feedback and input and your comments. In order to limit distractions, mute or turn off your cell phones. Be aware of and allow for the difference between intention and impact. We invite you to listen deeply and always by invitation by using the Q&A and/or chat. If you identify any assumptions, suspend judgment. If you have an opportunity to speak orally, limit your time to 1.5 minutes so as to ensure that others have an opportunity to share their comments and/or questions. At all times, speak your truth, whether that is in oral form or in written form. And if things get difficult, turn to wonder, knowing that you are making a significant contribution. We want to emphasize to expect non-closure, because we may not be able to answer all your questions. We may not be able to acknowledge all comments because we may not be at that part of the study right now. Just know that the team is working diligently to get to those answers. And then finally, keep the meeting moving forward and focused on the meeting purpose. Again, welcome. Looking forward to sharing space with you. All right, Mike. Oh, no, it's still me. Still me. It's always me. All right. So we wanted to emphasize yet again, you can ask questions throughout the duration of the meeting, and we will have a dedicated question and answer part of this meeting. As we stated before, please use the Q&A functionality in Zoom to ask all questions. And then if you have any comments, input, or feedback, please use the chat feature. Thank you so much. Welcome, Mike. Over to you.
Thank you, Akila. So, the Corps of Engineers is well suited to doing resiliency study, and that's because we have a civil works mission on the Great Lakes. We have lots and lots of facilities, not just on the Great Lakes, but across the nation on the rivers and reservoirs and things like that. We have lots of facilities, and a lot, they're water resources, so they are vulnerable to weather and things like that. And so we think about resiliency, and we have a definition at the Corps of Engineers. Resilience is the ability to anticipate, prepare for, and adapt to changing conditions, and to withstand, respond to, and recover rapidly from disruptions. And you can kind of see this cycle here of the USACE resilience principles: prepare, absorb, recover, and adapt. And so those four elements is in a cycle, basically. And so prepare, as you can imagine, is being ready before, during, and immediately after a disruption. It's about planning, training, putting protections in place, preparing. Absorb, endure the disruption with minimal damage. That's the whole idea behind resiliency. Do so without losing normal functionality as best you can. after the event, recover, quickly return to functionality. Recover may be rebuilding, and maybe rebuilding in ways that allow for less damage from similar events in the future. And adapt, always adapt, make changes that reduce negative impacts, learn from what's happened, adapt for the future. And this is a continuous cycle, hopefully continual improvement. And that's what resilience is all about when it comes to the Corps of Engineers and the way we look at it. We'd also like to know what resiliency means for you. Specifically, what does coastal resiliency mean to you? And so I would like to turn it back over to Dr. Martin. We're going to go through this icebreaker activity to talk a little bit about what resiliency means to you. Akila.
Thank you so much, Mike. Thank you for going over coastal resiliency. And so now, as Mike said, we'd like to hear from you. So the prompt is, what does coastal resiliency mean to you? We are navigating outside of Zoom to a different site called Poll Everywhere. There are 3 ways that you can navigate to the site. Madeline, my co-facilitator, has placed the link to Poll Everywhere in the chat, so you can click there. If you have your cell phone available and your camera, you can scan the QR code that is listed on the screen here in the square to navigate to the site. You can also text your response, and I'll go over the number very quickly. The number you would text is 22333. I'll say it again. The number is 22333. And then you would text Choice Guru 975 in the message window. So the word choice, CHOICE, the word guru, GURU, and then the numbers 975. So once again, to text your response, the number is 22333. And then you would text Choice Guru 975, and then whatever words, statements, sentences, phrases that you like to represent what coastal resiliency means to you. You can also navigate to the website, and I'll say that out loud for those who may not be able to visually see the link in the chat. It is POLLEV, so POLL for pole, EV, so that's for everywhere, but shortened to EV. So pollev.com. So POLLEV.com. And then / choice guru 975. And that's the word choice, CHOICE, the word guru, GURU, and the numbers 975. All right. Hopefully everyone was able to navigate to the site. I'm going to share my screen so that we can see the word cloud come alive. I'd like to take a few seconds to share with you what a word cloud is, just in case you don't know what that means. Let me know if you can see my screen. You see the word cloud? Yes. Okay, great. So a word cloud basically shows whatever the participants are inputting into answering the question, and the words that are more frequently showing up will show larger on the screen. So the more often you see a word, the larger it will appear on the screen. So for example, the word healthy, coastal, and future obviously are being frequently used in your phrases or statements or words. So we really appreciate you participating in this engagement activity. You can participate throughout the duration of this meeting. I will have it activated until the end of the meeting, so please feel free to participate multiple times. You can add as many words or phrases or statements as you wish. And once again, we thank you for participating. We thank you for being here and sharing space with us. All right, over to you, Mike. Thank you.
Thanks, Akila. So an interesting exercise, and you saw that the words that are most important to people are the most common ones, and we use those words to help us to understand what's important. We also thought a little bit about this, and with our state's partners, including Wisconsin, we thought about the who, what, when, where, why, and how of resiliency. And so who, in the general case, it means the people that live on the lakes, the infrastructure, the communities, the habitats, the recreation, the creatures that live in the Great Lakes. what do we need to be resilient about? Well, the lakes change over time, and we know that there's variable water levels. Recently, in 2020 timeframe, there was record high lake levels, and not that much farther longer before that were low lake levels. The ice conditions are changing. Ice can protect the shoreline during big storms, and ice conditions are changing. And basically, we're looking at a range of possible climate change scenarios. We don't know exactly what's coming, but we know that there could be a range, and we're actually studying that. We'll tell you a little bit more about that. When both short term and long term, we need to know what's happening both in the short term, just to be prepared as best we can, but we also want to know long term, for investments and things like that. When you're making an investment along the coast, you want to kind of know what that investment may be subjected to in terms of conditions on the lakes. And so again, looking at long term in that range of possible climate change scenarios. Where the United States Great Lakes coast, very straightforward. However, I did want to mention that the Great Lakes are not only the United States, but they're also Canada. And as you can imagine, we're not going to be spending U.S. Government funds, or the states won't be spending their funds on Canadian projects. However, the work that we do will be coordinated with them. We'll share the work that we will do on modeling possible climate change scenarios and other things. And we have a good relationship with Canada, and we will be sharing that with them. And so never fear about that. We're definitely collaborating with our neighbors to the north. Why? This is kind of what we need your help on the most out of this, is because we really need to know why are we trying to be resilient? What's out there? There's economic interest, there's environmental interest, there's social interest, and there's values of the Great Lakes states. There's so many things that we want to protect. But we kind of need more input as to what exactly we're trying to do here. And how will we go about doing this? As we go forward through this study, one of the first things we want to do is to promote a shared responsibility. And I think our shared vision exercises today will help to do that. We're in this together. We need to share a responsibility for looking forward into the future when it comes to the Great Lakes coast and the resiliency of them. What can we do? How will we do that? We can also identify a range of actions. When we see vulnerabilities, we can say, hey, we can do these things, a range of actions. These are things we can do. And those will help us to guide regional investment. And we'll talk more about the how here. But again, based on your feedback today, that'll help us to do the how, the why part a little bit more. And that'll help us also with the shared vision. Next slide, please. And Akila, I'll turn it back over to you, and you can introduce our partners from the state of Wisconsin.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mike. All right, welcome everyone. So now I'd like to introduce our state of Wisconsin partners. And so we have Mike Fries, who is the Bureau Director, and we have Kate Angel as the Program Manager, and Todd Brightby as the Program Coordinator, and Lydia Salas as the Program Coordinator. I'd like to welcome Mike Fries to the stage to provide the state of Wisconsin's opening remarks and presentation. Welcome, Mike, and thank you all for being here with us.
Thank you, Akila. And welcome everybody. I appreciate the interest. It looks like we have about 60 some people attending. So thank you for taking your time to provide your feedback onto this effort. So Akila, there, thank you. So briefly, I wanted to give you an introduction to the Coastal Management Program. I should say that the Coastal Management Program is a state-federal partnership between Wisconsin and our Department of Administration and NOAA's and the U.S. Department of Commerce's National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. We've been a federally approved program since 1978, one of the first in the Great Lakes, first in the nation, first in the Great Lakes. We have a guiding principle of enjoy and protect Wisconsin's Great Lakes coastal resources. And that principle sort of encompasses the idea of sustainable economic development, resource protection, and providing access to the Great Lakes coastal resources for all to enjoy. Briefly, we provide technical assistance, financial and coordinating assistance to to the state agencies, tribal governments, local governments, as well as academic institutions and nonprofits. We are a network program in that we work collaboratively with all the agencies within the state to focus our shared resources to manage Wisconsin's Great Lakes coastal resources. And we have a Wisconsin Coastal Management Council that provides policy guidance to the program as we implement the program. Slide. So then briefly, I want to talk about existing efforts related to coastal management with coastal resiliency within Wisconsin through the coastal management program. One of the first things to mention would be our coastal hazards work group, which brings together local governments, academics, nonprofits, and state agencies who work collaboratively on addressing coastal hazards, flooding, erosion, and storm surges in the state. I wanted to mention projects related to Monoman, wild rice restoration activities, and in particular, the overarching effort of the Wisconsin Initiative of Climate Change Impacts, which the program and its staff are intricately involved with. Next slide. The Great Lakes Coastal Resiliency Study, I take a step back, and this effort was initiated in 2016 in Milwaukee at a meeting of the Coastal States Organization, a group that represents all coastal states that have coastal management programs. So everybody from Guam to Maine. But we met in Milwaukee, and at that time, a contingency of the 8 Great Lakes coastal programs got together, working collaboratively with the Army Corps of Engineers and assistance from National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration to look at initiating this effort. So starting in 2016, culminating in an agreement that I believe was signed in 2022. I could be wrong there, but briefly, this will be a 5-year study with $14 million of cost share fund and cost share funds from the Army Corps and the Great Lakes states, the 8 Great Lakes states. We are looking to focus our efforts on storms, flooding, water level fluctuations, erosion, and coastal processes related to sedimentation and accretion. Thank you. Next slide. In Wisconsin, we are looking to inform our existing efforts related to coastal resiliency. I'll go over a couple examples of that moving forward, and look at the further administration of the coastal management program, provide us some guidance on direction, and specifically a number of projects that we're hoping to see direct benefit or initial benefit from. This would be work in the city of Superior, Wisconsin Point Resiliency Study, East River Collaborative project we have going on in Brown County, Sign Myers Beach and Racine, and others. So we're hoping to see this inform the researchers and practitioners within the Wisconsin Coastal Hazards Work Group as well. Next slide. So a little bit more detail on some of the existing and past efforts we've had related to coastal resiliency. The Wisconsin Coastal Management Data Infrastructure Project was a no-funded project of special merit that was driven by a number of extreme storm events in our Lake Superior Basin that had severe impacts into the transportation infrastructure of that region. And we were focusing on road crossings and culverts. So helping with local governments on identifying those road crossings, developing digital elevation models to create resiliency for when those road crossings were required to be replaced, to create greater resiliency within that. And this was a collaborative project between the Coastal Management Program and the state's cartographer's office, as well as our state's geographic information officer that sits within the our bureau where the Coastal Management Program exists. Next slide. The CALM project, Collaborative Action for Lake Emissions Coastal Resiliency, is a community of practice bringing together local municipalities and decision makers who are experiencing a collective impacts of water levels, this changes, erosion and flooding, and bringing them together to talk about how they can share their information about how they're addressing it and finding funding sources. Next slide. The CHAOS project, Cold Hazards of Superior, I should say, was initiated by our colleagues at the Minnesota Lake Superior Coastal Program, and we chose to engage in further support through a Sea Grant Coastal Management Fellow. But again, looking at those unique aspects of resiliency within the Lake Superior Basin, particularly along the North Shore and South Shore of Wisconsin and Minnesota. So I guess overarching this, you can see that really we've been focused on the sharing of information through our communities of practice, and we're looking and excited about what this Great Lakes Coastal Resiliency Study will do to engage further practitioners and decision makers in developing greater resiliency within our coastal communities. So we plan to engage everybody in this. I should mention we have a NOAA partner within the state, the Lake Superior National Estuarine Research Reserve we hope to engage with, as well as our Sea Grant Institute and our soon-to-be designated Bay of Green Bay National Estuarine Research Reserve. And that's briefly my presentation. I guess, Akila, we could take any specific questions at this point then?
Yeah, we definitely. Yeah, no, thank you, Mike. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So if you have any questions, you can definitely use the Q&A functionality in Zoom that we discussed earlier. And if you have any feedback or comments, you can definitely place those in the chat at this time. So thank you so much, Mike. Thank you so much, the rest of the Wisconsin team, for being present and providing those remarks in that presentation. We really appreciate your partnership. And so now I'd like to bring to the stage for opening remarks for Army Corps of Engineers, Adam Fox, who serves as the Plan Formulation Section Chief of the USACE Detroit District. And USACE is just U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Welcome, Adam. Thank you.
Thank you for that introduction, Dr. Martin. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you, Adam.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Some connectivity issues today in the office, so just wanted to verify that. But again, thank you for the introduction, and thank you for joining us today for the Wisconsin Shared Vision meeting for the Coastal Resiliency Study. And we certainly appreciate your attendance in contributing your input to this important Great Lakes work. As Dr. Martin mentioned, I'm Adam Fox. I'm chief of the Plan Formulation Section of the Detroit District of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. However, our office is partnering with our sister Great Lakes district offices. One is located in Chicago and the other in Buffalo, New York. And so between the three districts, we cover all of the Great Lakes states, including Wisconsin. We also have our St. Paul district that also covers the regulatory section in Wisconsin as well. But for the Great Lakes portion and the coastline of Wisconsin, it's Chicago and Detroit districts that team up to take care of that. We are trying to also work as a team to make this useful and pertinent study for all of the Great Lakes tribes, stakeholders, partners, and the millions of residents who call this region home. So, you know, it's not just Wisconsin or Michigan, but we're working to do this for the entirety of the Great Lakes. Just to give you a little bit more background, the Detroit District Office has a large area of responsibility, which covers Lakes Michigan, Huron, Superior, and St. Clair. And in this area, we maintain and manage nearly 100 harbors, channels, breakwaters, and other assets, including the world-famous Soo Locks on Lake Superior. We also restore and protect ecosystems throughout the Great Lakes and Wisconsin to improve fish and wildlife habitat that has been damaged through development and industrial impacts. And because of this, we have a great interest in understanding future climate change impacts to not only our physical assets that we own with the Corps, but also to the Great Lakes shorelines, ecosystems, infrastructure, and the general population of the region. As that is said, we look forward to your active participation in making this study as comprehensive, useful, and impactful as possible. So please, please, please contribute what you can to this important study. Thank you very much, and back to Dr. Martin.
Thank you so much, Adam. We really appreciate those remarks. And now I'd like to welcome our esteemed project manager, Mike Padilla, back to the stage to go over the study's background. Welcome, Mike.
Thanks, Akila. So I'd like to tell you a little bit about the Corps of Engineers in the Great Lakes. You can see the map here, and it actually is color-coded. First of all, you can see the 8 Great Lakes states: Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and New York, and Michigan. Color-coded here are the 3 Corps of Engineers districts: Chicago, Detroit, and Buffalo. Now, the Corps of Engineers has a civil works mission across the nation and also on the Great Lakes. Our key missions on the Great Lakes are navigation, flood risk management, aquatic ecosystem restoration, emergency response, and you may also know about our regulatory mission. So when it comes to those missions, all of those have the need for resiliency. And so having to do this study is a good fit for the Corps of Engineers and with the 8 Great Lakes states. Next slide, please. A little bit about the study background. You can see here the Great Lakes Coastal Resiliency Study is considered to be a mega study by the Army Corps of Engineers, a mega study being one that just has far-reaching consequences, that has scrutiny from the leadership of the Corps all the way to headquarters. The overall objective of the study is to protect the long-term economic, environmental, and social value of the Great Lakes through proactive planning. And that's the whole idea, to be proactive. And again, we have uncertainty ahead of us when it comes to climate change. And so we're going to try to be as proactive as we can, knowing that there's no certain scenario that's going to happen. It's more of a range of possible scenarios. The estimated cost of the project is $14.4 million, 75% federal and 25% state cost share. And you can see the photographs there of us executing the cost share agreement back in September of 2022. And the estimated schedule is 5 years. The study start date was in July of 2023, and the end will be in October of 2028. Next slide, please. So the general scope of the project is these 3 things here. It's a watershed assessment that's intended to provide a foundation for future investment by federal, tribal, state, and local governments to improve coastal resiliency. This study will not recommend specific projects, but it will kind of set the stage for prioritizing what needs to be looked into more deeply. So we'll be doing a vulnerability assessment. We're going to identify coastal areas that are already or likely to become vulnerable to future flooding, erosion, and accretion. We want to identify resilient actions to address vulnerabilities from the assessment and improve resilience and adaptability of coastal resources. Finally, we want to come up with a plan. It's a strategic plan, not a really very specific plan, but strategic, with strategic recommendations so that we can help to prioritize future investments and that will improve coastal resiliency going forward. Next slide, please. This study is a collaborative approach. Not only the 3 U.S. Army Corps of Engineers districts on the Great Lakes, but also the 8 Great Lakes states, as we mentioned, are cost share partners in the study. Tribal nations, we've been working with the tribal nations, had already several coordination meetings with them and shared vision meetings with the tribes. And we look forward to their participation in the study. Federal, state, and local agencies, as you can imagine, there's federal agencies such as NOAA, USGS, many different federal agencies, also state and local agencies, and multiply that by the state, by 8 Great Lakes states, and all the different localities within those 8 Great Lakes states. It's a lot of agencies that we want to collaborate with and cooperate and get input into the study. And finally, the general public, you folks that are here today, those that live, work, and recreate on the Great Lakes, we want your input. And again, today is the first public meeting, and we hope that we can get your input into the shared vision, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go forward. Next slide, please. So here's some of the questions that that come up, with people when it talks about climate change. And you think about climate change, all the things that could occur, especially not that long ago when we had high lake levels. Is my favorite beach underwater? Will it go underwater? And I can tell you in Chicago, there's been beaches that used to be there and they're not there anymore. The high lake levels came in and washed them out. And, the city only has so much funding that, to eventually try to put them back. And when they try to repair them and put them back, they've got to be more resilient. Effect on tourism. The Great Lakes states are a great place to recreate and tourism, and so people are concerned about that. They're concerned about fish habitat loss. Fisheries is a huge commerce on the Great Lakes and recreation as well. Flooding. People are worried about flooding. There was lots of flooding that occurred in a couple years back. And then when you have low lake levels, will my boat bottom out? Can I go to the places I want to go with my boat? The navigation industry, when the lakes are very low, sometimes they have to light load where they can't take advantage of their full cargo capacity. They have to light load, which basically is not efficient, and it causes increased shipping costs. And there's lots of other effects that could occur from climate change in the future. Next slide, please. So a little bit more about the watershed study. So this is an official, what they call a Section 729 watershed study. Section 729 coming from Water Resources Development Act and from Congress. And Congress basically asked the Corps to look at watersheds, and the Great Lakes is a watershed. Many bodies of water, flow into the Great Lakes, and so it's a watershed, very large one. And the watershed assessment basically is number one is to document a shared watershed vision. It's very important that everybody's kind of on the same page and has the same vision for the future, where the Great Lakes and the resources on the Great Lakes are more resilient. The watershed assessment then also recommends recommendations for actions that can be taken to address identified problems, and kind of a strategic roadmap to implement recommendations. And so there's a timeline here in this graphic. And one of the first things that we did was to sign the cost share agreement I mentioned earlier with the 8 Great Lakes states and our partners. After we did that, we engaged in almost a year-long effort to put together a project management plan. And the project management plan is very, very important because we had to identify and come to agreement with our partners as to what this was all about. What is the scope? What exactly are we going to do? And when I mean scope, I mean very detailed description of what we plan to do in this study. And with that description is, the scope description is a schedule saying when are we going to do these things, and what can we expect as we move forward through the 5 years of the study. And finally, a budget. We don't have unlimited funds, so the project management plan also has a budget involved. And so those 3 things together, scope, schedule, and budget, is kind of a roadmap for how this study will be conducted. And the project management plan is available on our website. It will be updated annually as we go forward. In fact, it will be due for a update in July of this year. The first milestone as you go through the timeline is the shared vision. And that's really why we're here today, to talk more about that shared vision. And that's a milestone. Once we've gotten input from the Great Lakes states, which we already have, and stakeholders and tribal interests and the general public. And we've basically come up with, we think, with is a shared vision for the study. Then we will then report on that and tell our headquarters, our leadership of the Corps of Engineers and leadership of the Great Lakes states what our shared vision is. And that's the first milestone. That milestone is in June of this year. So we're working diligently right now to meet that milestone, and we really appreciate your input to help us with that. Once we've done the shared vision milestone, then we will be doing that watershed assessment that we talked about, and we'll tell you more about that. But that assessment will then, after lots of work, will enable us to come up with some recommendations, and that's the second milestone for the study. And that recommendations milestone is just what it says. That we come up with some recommendations for resilience on the Great Lakes coast, and we will share that with you. And in fact, we'll share you it in draft form to make sure we got it right, and we'll accept comments and we'll revise it accordingly. And once we have that recommendations, we'll move forward into a final report. And that final report, we hope, will be very usable by the 8 Great Lakes states and stakeholders and the general public. Not only will there be a report, but there will also be some other tools that will be part of this, interactive tools and websites, things like that will be useful to people when it comes to them questioning the resiliency or what to do about resiliency going into the future. And we'll tell you more about those things as we go forward. Wanted to mention that our Great Lakes and Ohio River Division is the decision-making authority on this. And so we have to satisfy them that we've met all the requirements for these milestones moving forward. Next slide, please. A little bit about the timeline, especially when it comes to engagements. I know that you folks are probably interested in, how do you keep up with the study? How do you learn about the study as it moves forward? So you can see this timeline right now. We're in Q2 of 2024, started on April 1st. And we've had shared vision meetings, both with the tribes, but also with public coordination, the 8 Great Lakes states. We're having these shared vision meetings. Once we move forward from there, we'll be making available study progress briefings. So there'll be briefings for the general public all the way through the timeline of the study. In 2025, Q3, we will actually have some results from the basin-wide analysis that we're conducting, and we'll tell you more about today. We'll be having 5 meetings to discuss this with you all. And so that's one thing that we want to present is what are the results of our basin-wide analysis. As we go into 2026, some study progress briefings. Again, we'll be doing lots of work, and we'll tell you about the work that we're doing and results and things like that in those study progress briefings. In Q1 of 2027, we'll have a draft recommendations document, and we'll make that available to the public. We'll brief you on it when it comes to public engagement, and we'll have also an 8-week public review period for you all to review what we've come up with and help us to finalize it. Moving forward towards the end of the study, we'll have some more progress briefings, and then we will complete the study in October of 2028. And again, that will include a final report, but also some interactive products and things that you all will be able to use as a result of this study. I wanted to direct your attention to the QAR code we mentioned a couple times. I really urge you to subscribe to our website and so that you'll be able to receive email blasts regarding these study updates. So we'll be briefing you and keeping you up to date and putting the products before you in these study updates. And also we'll be making announcements of future public engagements when we start to. Right now we have them generally scheduled, but we'll actually be picking the exact day that we'll be having these, and we'll get that information out to you in plenty of time for you to get it on your calendar. So if you're able to subscribe, you'll be able to get all of this information, and you'll be able to be a participant in this study to make sure we get it right. Next slide, please. With that, we're going to talk a little bit more about the shared vision statement, which is really the main reason for the meeting today. And I'd like to reintroduce Dr. Akila Martin, and she'll take us forward on this. Akila.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mike. Thank you so much for providing the study background. We really appreciate that in that presentation. And so now I'd like to welcome to the stage our very own Chicago District Planner, Kara Patello, to discuss the development of the shared vision statement. Welcome, Kara.
Thank you so much. All right, so good morning, everyone, and thank you again for joining us here today. So to get into kind of the main topic of the meeting that we're hosting today, which is, again, that shared vision statement. So like Mike had mentioned earlier in the meeting, our goal of building resiliency throughout the Great Lakes is really a collective effort, and it will require a lot of commitment and long-term dedication to make this goal happen for all of us. And so we're here today to talk about the shared vision statement, which is going to serve as kind of our guiding principle as we move through the various stages of the resiliency study over the next 5 years. And so we're hoping to come up with a statement that's going to make sure everyone that's involved in the study is aligned around that common purpose. And so we really want to understand what that common purpose is and make sure that our shared vision statement isn't just resonating with us, the resiliency study team, the Army Corps of Engineers or our state partners, but also we want to make sure it resonates with everyone who cares about the Great Lakes. So we're really excited to have you here today and are really looking forward to hearing the feedback that you have on some of the statements that our team has drafted just to get us started. So here is a little bit of information about how we got here. So like I said, we've drafted a few statements to kind of get the conversation going. And so this started with some workshops that we held with the resiliency study team. And that team consists, again, of the 3 Army Corps of Engineer districts, as well as our 8 Great Lake state cost-sharing partners. And so the team got together and we held some workshops where we started to brainstorm what makes the Great Lakes important to those that live, work, and recreate along the coast of the Great Lakes. And you can see some of that feedback here on the screen, which we also got feedback from tribal nations during the Bureau of Indian Affairs Midwest Region's Partners in Action Conference last fall. And so all the feedback is kind of summarized here, some of the key things that came up showing here on this slide. And so as you can see, we got some really great feedback. So things like fresh water, commerce, fishing, beaches and tourism, ecosystems, wetlands, habitats. You know, it's a way of life for a lot of people and communities. There's a lot of cultural significance in the Great Lakes. And so our team looked at all this feedback, and you can see here in these blue boxes at the top of each column, those are some of the key themes that we started to see emerge as we looked at the feedback that we got. So really, there's a couple of themes around the importance of resources, recreational opportunities, the natural environment, and then as well as the intrinsic and cultural value of the Great Lakes. And so the resiliency study team took this feedback and we kind of thought about it as a team. And we also started to think about what makes a strong vision statement. We really want this to be kind of like a catchy slogan because we want it to be memorable. It's going to be guiding us over the next 5 years. And so we want ours to, you know, be simple. We want it to be memorable, and we want to have a clear interpretation. So that was some of the things that we were trying to keep in mind when we were developing these drafts that I'm about to share. And just want you to keep in mind that these are not final. So like Mike mentioned, we have been hosting a series of shared vision meetings. We had 2 with our tribal nations. We had 1 with the federal agency partners, and then we're hosting 9 public meetings. So the team will be taking all of this feedback back with us, and we'll be incorporating it into that final shared vision statement. So really excited to hear what you think about these drafts that we're proposing. And the first draft that we developed is that our vision for the Great Lakes coast is to improve and protect their ecosystems, recreational opportunities, cultural significance, communities, and economies to be resilient for present and future generations. Our second shared vision draft is that our vision for the Great Lakes coast is to support, strengthen, and protect their natural resources, recreational opportunities, communities, economies, and quality of life for current and future generations. And then the third draft that we came up with is to ensure a resilient and sustainable future for vibrant and coastal communities, abundant natural and cultural resources, and thriving economic assets. And so these are the 3 drafts that the resiliency study team, so again, the Army Corps of Engineers and our 8 state partners, came up with to kind of get the discussion going. These are not our final statements. Again, we're looking for feedback. So that is why we would love to know, do these statements capture your vision for a resilient Great Lakes coast? And then if they don't, we would love for you to tell us why not. So I'm going to pause here to give you a second to read through them a couple of times, and you can put your thoughts in the chat. But we would love to hear if there's something about one of these statements over the other that you think is really important that we include and we carry over to our final shared vision statement. We would love to hear that. And then if you think that there is something really important that we have not included that we need to make sure gets into the final shared vision statement, we would love to hear that as well. And then just any other suggestions for improvement. So we'll be taking the feedback from all of these shared vision meetings, and we will be using that to inform our revision of that final statement, which will ultimately be posted on our study website. And if you would rather submit your feedback a little bit more anonymously, you can send it either directly to myself, Dr. Akila Martin, or Madeline Dewey, the two facilitators, and we will read it aloud to the group anonymously. Or you could put it in the Q&A function and check that box for submit privately. And you can submit your feedback anonymously if you would prefer to do it that way. But I will pause and give you a couple of seconds to read through them a few times and think about it and share your thoughts with us.
Kara, it looks like I have a direct message that I'll read anonymously. So this person said, what about provide an example of a successful coastal resiliency project for other regions? So thank you for that comment.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Madeline. And then I see a comment in the chat that says recommend changing number 2 to protect their cultural and natural resources. This is more inclusive of types of resources and aligns better with the other vision statements. Thank you for sharing that. And again, just to clarify, we have a couple of options here, and they sound kind of similar because we developed them with that same kind of source information. And so we'll be selecting one of these to refine, and we'll have one will be our final shared vision statement. So these are just a couple of options to kind of get the ball rolling and to get brainstorming. So if you think there's something really important in one of them that's not included in the others that you think we should include in that final single shared vision statement, we'd love to hear that. I see a couple more comments in the chat. So I think the first one captures the vision well in a clear order of priority. I like the use of ecosystems in this one. And then I have a private message that says, I don't see that the statements address specifically adapting to and accounting for climate change impacts. So thanks for sharing those comments. Here is another one. Resiliency may mean not protecting everything. Option 3 allows for more trade-offs and what we choose to protect, how we adapt, and what we may have to let go, all towards vibrant communities, etc. And then number 3 is great. So thank you very much for all those thoughts, and please keep them coming if something comes to mind. So maintain economic assets and final choice, critical to recognize the national economic impact of coastal manufacturing. All right, and I have another direct message here that says, I appreciate that 1 and 2 include future generations specifically. I'd like to see the final version include that. Thank you very much. All right, Natalie and Akila, have you received any direct messages?
I haven't, Kara. Thank you.
None for me, Kara.
All right, and I see more great comments coming through. So I agree that including future generations is very important to any vision for this. And another comment that says, I think representing nature with terms like ecosystems and ecosystem process or biodiversity is important. When we call it natural resources, it is too human consumption oriented. Want to keep a sense of balance in the language. These are great thoughts. Thank you so much for sharing them with us. And I don't want to cut anyone off, so if you have thoughts that come to mind as we kind of progress through the meeting and we share a little bit more about the study products, please feel free to continue to put them in the chat. But I will move on to the second part of our shared vision exercise here. So our team has developed a website where you can share your preference and kind of rank those 3 options that we just talked about. And so like I said, we will be using this information, so kind of collecting this data about the preferences of the 3 statements, as well as in combination with all these great comments and feedback that we've gotten on them. And we will use this information as a team. So the Army Corps and our state partners will take this information and we will kind of revise and refine that final shared vision statement that we will share on our website. But if you would like to go to this website, you can either use the QR code here in the bottom left corner or type directly in this URL here at the bottom. And if you can't read it, it's GLCRS. So again, that's for Great Lakes Coastal Resiliency Study, GLCRS.evs.anl.gov/shared vision. And when you get to that website, you will see those 3 draft statements that we just talked about listed with a box next to each one. And there we're asking for you to please enter 1 for your top choice. So tell us which one is your favorite, and then 2 for your second choice, 3 for your third choice. And we're asking that you please submit only 1 response just to ensure that everyone's voice is heard equally. And this website, this Shared Vision exercise website will be live for the duration of the meeting. So it's going to it'll only work for the times that we're hosting these Shared Vision meetings. So for the rest of the 2.5-hour time block that we have this meeting scheduled, it'll be live. So if you'd like to share the link with a colleague or a friend or someone who you think would be interested in kind of participating in this exercise, feel free to share the link and it'll be active for the 2.5 hours. that any of the shared vision meetings are being hosted. So we have this one right now. It'll be available for until 12:30 Central Time, 1:30 Eastern Time, and then we're also having another meeting if you would like to come back to share additional thoughts, or if you know someone that you think would be interested in participating and providing that feedback, they're welcome to join us at our final shared vision meeting, which is this after hours meeting that will be held this evening at 5:30 p.m. Central Time, 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And thank you so much for being here and for being a part of our shared vision statement, and really appreciate the feedback. And again, if anything else comes to mind, feel free to either put it in the chat or send directly to myself, Dr. Martin, or Madeline, and we will take that feedback back to the team with us to incorporate in our final shared vision. So thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Kara. Everyone, please subscribe to the website. Madeline has placed the link to the shared vision meeting that's happening this evening. Please come back if it's appropriate for you. So thank you so much, Kara, for that great presentation. And now I'd like to welcome to the stage Chicago District's very own lead planner for the Great Lakes Coastal Resiliency Study, Jana Potoff. Welcome, Jana.
Thanks, Dr. Martin, and thank you all for joining us today. The next few slides, we are going to build a flowchart of our major study tasks that will inform the study recommendations. The Corps has recently completed 2 large-scale coastal watershed studies. The latest is called the South Atlantic Coastal Study, and we're going to be using some of the graphics that the South Atlantic Coastal Study has produced to give you an idea of what our deliverables are going to look like. So to understand where because our goal is coastal resiliency, but for us to understand how to become resilient, we first have to understand where are we vulnerable. So we're very fortunate that the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative has funded a study that looks at the expected range of Great Lakes water levels, wave heights, and ice conditions under a range of future possible climate scenarios. We are working together with a multi-agency study team, the Corps' Engineer Research and Development Center, NOAA's Great Lakes Environmental Research Laboratory, USGS Woods Hole Coastal Marine Science Center, each of the Great Lakes Corps districts, Buffalo, Chicago, and Detroit, Cornell University, and the University of Michigan. We host quarterly conference calls where our technical team shares the shares the updates on how the modeling is going and progress. People who subscribe to our project website will be notified when the results of this modeling become available. So I encourage you to subscribe to this project website. So with that modeling, we're going to have a better understanding of where there's going to be high water levels under different climate scenarios, and then also low water levels. We're modeling, to understand both extremes. With that information, we're going to be taking the high water levels and overlaying them on coastal resources. And so here's an example from the South Atlantic. It's called the basin-wide, we're calling it the basin-wide analysis. And it will inform, areas along the Great Lakes coast that might be inundated from those high water levels, or will also inform where the low water impacts will be, or the low water extents. This information will be on a publicly accessible geoportal. And the goal here is to get a big picture assessment of using basin-wide data sets. The product will be very user-friendly and can be used not only to identify, existing coastal resources, potential impacts because of inundation and low water extent, but what could also be used to inform site selection for future projects. Another reason to subscribe to the website is because through this website we'll be blasting out once that GIS analysis and geoportal is available. So using the information that we have from the modeling and the GIS analysis, also our recollection of impacts from recent low water low water extremes and high water extremes, the Corps of Engineers and our state partners will select focus areas to do more site-specific analysis. Those focused area evaluations will be workshops, 2-day workshops, where we'll be inviting coastal resource managers and owners who are familiar with their coastal resources to a workshop. Wisconsin will be hosting 2 workshops, and we'll have up to 10 coastal resources that will be discussed at these workshops. The goal of the workshops is to understand what are the vulnerabilities under different climate scenarios, so we can plan for short, near-term, and long-term actions to improve resiliency. So with the results of the basin-wide analysis, the focused evaluations, all of these study products will then inform what our recommendations are going to be, study recommendations. And so those study recommendations will include a what, like what is the recommendation? Do we need to monitor the site? Do we need, because the consequences are, we've already seen impacts under the recent highs. Do we need to study for action to do something, or are the impacts farther out? And so maybe it's a study plus monitoring. And then as listed here, it's not just the Corps, it's not just the state, it's other federal agencies, it's local communities, tribal nations. So, and so here's an example, once again, from the South Atlantic Coastal Study, where you'll see that there are different recommendations, but in the parentheses in aqua that we inserted, some are multi-agency actions, some are, by the Corps. Some actions are near term, like something needs to happen in the very near future because there are negative impacts. And then some are farther out in the future. This will then help us on the Corps, the states, other federal agencies, and communities help to prioritize their investments in the future. We realize that we'll only have up to 140 of these coastal resources that we'll be discussing at these workshops, that others may want to do more site-specific analysis, and, based on the information that's provided in that GIS basin-wide analysis. So we're developing 2 additional products. Buffalo District has completed already a basin-wide framework for resilient shoreline management. This will be updated to include that aspect of climate resiliency. In addition to a guidebook, we're going to have a higher level a web product that will walk you through the steps and considerations when looking at and examining coastal resources, existing ones, ones that are in design, as well as ones that are being planned in the future. And thank you so much for your time, and I pass it back to Akila.
Thank you so much, Jana. Really appreciate that presentation on the study background and the major study tasks. So thank you so much, Jana, and I'd like to welcome back Kara Patello to discuss the basin-wide analysis. Welcome, Kara.
Great, thank you so much. And so for the last part of our presentation, we just wanted to share some of the work that we've started on study deliverables. So that, again, reorienting you on this flow chart that we talked about here, kind of zooming into this basin-wide analysis, GIS analysis that we have at the early part of our study. So the objective of the basin-wide analysis is that we're really trying to understand the big picture of how changing lake levels due to climate change could possibly impact important coastal resources, so things like our coastal communities, infrastructure, and then coastal environments. And like Jana mentioned, our first step in resilience is to really understand where there are existing important resources that could be at risk. So this first step in the watershed study is going to be really important because it'll help us identify the areas around the Great Lakes coast that we as the Army Corps of Engineers, other federal agencies, as well as our state partners, and then tribal nations, local communities, might want to look in a little bit more detail at the possible exposure of the resources. So kind of identifying areas that might warrant a little bit more of a detailed analysis. And so to do this, we are going to be doing this GIS analysis. And like Jana said, we're, since it's a basin-wide analysis, and again, really big picture screening type analysis, we're sticking to only using data sets that cover the full study area. So covers all 5 Great Lakes, and then the coastal areas of the 8 Great Lakes states as well. And this is to ensure that the analysis is consistent across the board. So again, using basin-wide data sets, we're not going to be incorporating state or local data at this point in the study. That'll come into play later if it's relevant. But right now, again, we want that apples to apples comparison of where there could be resources at risk throughout the Great Lakes coast. And so to identify those layers, the resiliency study team worked with engineers, planners, scientists, and cultural resource experts at the 3 Army Corps districts, 3 Great Lakes Army Corps districts, so Buffalo, Chicago, and Detroit, to help identify the coastal resources that we thought were important to include in the study and to include in this analysis. But we also worked pretty closely with our state partners on this, and that was great because each of the Great Lakes states has, their own unique perspectives and insights, and our state partners also do a really great job at kind of advocating for what the folks in their states really care about. So we were able to come up with a pretty comprehensive inventory of over 100 different GIS data layers for coastal resources. And we took this inventory of over 100 layers and we started to sort them into different categories or different broad buckets, kind of like based on the topic. So we have a category for social vulnerability and environmental burdens. So that will be one index. And then our second index is environmental and historic resources. Our third is population and infrastructure. And I'll go into a little bit more detail of what is included in each of these in just a second. And then the fourth index that we're developing is that combined coastal resources. So all of the resources in one index to give that really big picture view of all the resources at once. And so after we build out these different indexes, we're going to combine them with the hazards. So for this analysis and this study, the hazards that we're looking at are high and low water levels under a range of possible climate scenarios, and that's coming from that modeling effort that Donna kind of touched on earlier. So again, for this analysis, we're really focusing in on those high and low water levels and how they could change due to different climate change scenarios. So the resources that we're looking at, like I said, I'll go into a little bit more detail here just to give you an idea of the types of resources that we're including in the analysis. And the first index I'm going to talk about is the Social Vulnerability and Environmental Burdens Index. And as we think about building resiliency along the coast, it's really important that we're recognizing that there are individuals and there are communities that are exposed to a higher level of environmental burdens or that could be considered socially vulnerable, and these groups and individuals may be disproportionately affected by the hazards. And so to incorporate this into our GIS analysis, we're using a data source that's called the Environmental Justice Index, or EJI for short. And this is a data source that was developed by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC. And the EJI includes 36 different indicators that they use to identify areas that could be considered highly burdened. And so the EJI has considerations about environmental burdens. So as you can see here, that's things like air pollution, potentially hazardous and toxic sites, water pollution. They also consider social vulnerability. So that has indicators for things like racial, ethnic, minority status, socioeconomic status, housing characteristics. And then lastly, they also have health vulnerability data. So information about chronic disease burden, and all of this is kind of combined to help identify areas that could be considered highly burdened. And then in addition to that, to respect tribal sovereignty and self-government and to fulfill federal trust and treaty responsibilities to tribal nations, the land within the boundaries of federally recognized tribes will be designated as being socially vulnerable in our index. And so for that, we're going to be using data from the U.S. Census Bureau that identifies tribal census tracts. And so together, this will be combined to make our social vulnerability and environmental burdens index. And again, it will be combined with those high and low water hazards to help us kind of identify where these groups could be possibly exposed under our different climate change scenarios. So the second category of resources that we're looking at is environmental and historic resources. These are also really important as well. So we're looking at data for protected and managed areas, and you can see here the types of areas that we're going to be including. So we have both national and state parks, lake shores, and wildlife areas. We have data from the National Register of Historic Places, marine protected areas, conservation areas, critical habitat for threatened and endangered species. We have GIS data that we'll be using to kind of map out where these areas are located along the Great Lakes coast. And then we also have GIS data to identify where there are, different coastal habitats. So things like wetlands, forests, beaches and dunes, rocky shoreline, fish spawning locations. We have GIS data to map the location of these along the Great Lakes coast as well. And then we're also working with tribal nations to include any available GIS data for their resources that they would like to share with us. So we, like Mike had mentioned, have been hosting a series of meetings with tribal nations over the past couple of months to identify any information that they have that they would like to include in the study to better represent the significance of tribal resources as well to the best of our ability. But we also want to recognize that there are limitations to the type of analysis that we're doing. So it's a GIS analysis, and there might not be GIS data available for all resources throughout the Great Lakes. And so there are limitations to doing an analysis like this, and we want to acknowledge that. But we have also been working with the tribal nations to incorporate any information that they would like to share with us, any GIS data, and working to figure out how the best way to kind of incorporate that into the analysis that we're doing. And so our last index that I'm going to talk about is our Population and Infrastructure Resource Index. And as you can see here, it's a combination of critical infrastructure, community resources, tribal resources, and population. So when we're talking about critical infrastructure, you can see here, these are the Department of Homeland Security's critical infrastructure sectors. And so we're using these to kind of help us identify GIS data sources, so things like power plants, transportation, water treatment plants, any of those types of resources that could be located along the Great Lakes coast and impacted by changing lake levels. And then we'll also have GIS data for community resources. So that's things like schools, parks, important local economic assets. We'll have GIS data for that. And then again, coordinating with tribal nations on their resources, and population will be factored into this as well. So that is kind of what comprises those indexes that we're building. We're still very early in the study and definitely early with the basin-wide analysis, but we just wanted to give you an idea of the types of resources that we're going to be looking at and considering, and just kind of share some of the work that we've been doing. But we will be planning to have a public meeting in the fall of this year, so fall 2024. And at that point, we're hoping to have more details and more progress on the basin-wide analysis that we can share at that point. And our target date for having those results kind of finalized and ready to share with the public on that publicly accessible geoportal that Jonna had mentioned briefly, our target for that is summer 2025. So we really hope that you continue to stay involved, and thank you so much for being here and for listening to the presentation.
Thank you so much, Kara. Thank you so much, Jonna and Mike in the States. Presentations and remarks, thank you so much for that information and those details. Everyone, please make sure you're checking the chat. Madeline has placed lots of links. Please do just subscribe to our website so that you can stay up to date with the study. And so now we've arrived at the question and answer and comment portion of our meeting today. And just to go over it again, how to ask the question, please use the Q&A function of Zoom at the bottom of your screen. It has Q&A. You can send it privately, anonymously, however you feel. You can also send a question to me or Madeline as a direct message if you'd like to do it that way as well in the chat. All right, so I have one question here. Will the climate study also include estimates of trends in lake levels? For example, will lake levels likely be steady, rising average to high, or above record high for the next however so many years? Or forecasting when we might expect drops in addition to modeling extremes? Welcome, Jonna.
Hi. So the modeling will include, well, first off, the modeling's not done. And so, but part of our scope for this watershed study is to look at the modeling and see what type of statistics we can pull from them. As far as the years, the next years, that one is, we're looking at different climate scenarios. And so some are near term climate scenarios versus some are farther out. And all of that modeling, I mean, the climate is based on how much carbon is in the atmosphere, and that we're uncertain about. The goal of the modeling is to, though, provide like a stress test of the Great Lakes system so that we can understand what, you know, those extremes are, but then also have some ideas as to what are the nearer term climate scenarios we should be looking to.
Thanks, Jana. And Mary, if you require more clarification, you are more than welcome and invited to provide a follow-up question in the question and answer functionality of Zoom. So thank you so much, Jana. All right, I have another question. Will the recordings of these meetings be available online only for a certain length of time, or will they be available online indefinitely? And they think that this information is great. I believe, Madeline, you've placed some information regarding that in the chat. If you will, please repaste that so that everyone can see how they will be able to access the recordings for these meetings.
Yep, will do.
All right, thank you. All right, I'm not seeing any other questions. Oh, I spoke too soon. Thank you, Mary. So, Mary, I'm assuming you want me to follow up. So, how are you considering the beneficial erosion of shorelines to build and maintain coastal habitat? Thank you, Jana. Welcome.
Mm-hmm. So the modeling that is informing this resiliency study is looking at high water level, I mean, basically a change in water levels and wave conditions and ice conditions under different climate scenarios. So that's the answer the modeling will give us. Erosion is a really big question that's asked and is in the forefront of many people's minds in the Great Lakes. So with that, the output from the modeling, Jim Seligan, who is a coastal regional technical expert for the Great Lakes, will be writing up, you know, his assessment of what these different climate scenarios mean for, you know, erosion and accretion along each of the Great Lakes. As far as specific erosion analysis, that is a site-specific analysis. We will be able to do that qualitatively if a site is selected for a focused evaluation. But the information from the modeling could be used to perform a qualitative assessment of erosion.
Very nice. Thanks, Jana. Mary, I hope that answered your question. So thank you so much. You feel free to add more questions as you feel appropriate. All right, so I have two more questions, and one is how far into the Great Lakes themselves, i.e. depths, will be included? All right, welcome, Jana.
Go, Kara.
Well, so I was going to speak to the basin-wide analysis. So just for the basin-wide analysis, our study area is going to be determined by what the modeling shows, basically. So the extent of how far inland the water levels could go based on the different climate scenarios, as well as how far offshore. And so that's going to define the study area just based on what the modeling shows. And then we'll be using that kind of directly overlaying it with where the existing resources are located for the basin-wide analysis. That answers your question.
Thank you, Kara, for that. Titus, feel free to follow up with another question if you feel like you are looking for more clarification. All right, I have another question. Will the Saginaw Bay to Western Lake Erie Coastal Wetlands Conservation Blueprint project be incorporated into the Great Lakes Coastal Resiliency Study? Let me know if I read that too fast. I can say it again. You're on mute, Jonna. Welcome.
Mhm. So our website will include a link to the modeling website, which will include a map of all the areas that are being modeled under this climate scenario. So for Kara's that basin-wide analysis that she went into, if we have modeling output, then we will be able to include the Saginaw Bay, Western Lake Erie coastal wetlands. And I'm just uncertain where it's at and whether it is included in the model mesh.
Thank you, Jonna. Madeline, I'd like to ask, did you receive any direct messages for questions that you'd like to share at this time, or any questions I might have missed in the chats?
Thanks. Yeah, I don't see any direct messages to me in chat. Just want to thank everyone for directing your attention there as well, and following links and resources that I've been posting. There was one question that we answered via text, so we have answered a few via text, and I just want to alert the participants to that. There was a question about changing the areas of concern lists, and Jonna responded with a response on that. And I don't know, Jonna, if you'd like to read that response out loud, just so everyone on the phone can also hear that.
Oh, sure. So the AOC program, it's a really important program to tackle those historically contaminated sites in the Great Lakes. That program is run by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, the Great Lakes National Program Office. This study we will not be adding to that list or identifying a new list because that is not the Corps' mission area. I will share, though, that our modeling is being funded by the GLRI, which is run by the Great Lakes National Program Office, because they were very interested in the question of changing lake levels under under different climate scenarios. And so, yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Jonna. Thanks, Madeline, for that. So we have another question. Will you be identifying infrastructure and structures that needs to be moved back from the shoreline/bluffs?
Sure, so I can start the answer here. So we're not going to be, like Jonna said, we're not recommending specific measures to be taken, like really recommending that something be moved or what to do about the exposure. We're more so identifying areas and infrastructure and resources that could possibly be impacted or exposed to hazards, and that will result in future studies that will kind of come up with different specific recommendations about what to do about the exposure. But we're really just looking at identifying where the resources, such as infrastructure, could possibly be exposed.
Thank you, Kara. I appreciate that. Jonna, did you want to add anything to that response? Okay, good. All right, and I see Mary placed a follow-up in the chat. So thank you, Mary, so much for all your great questions. Thank you, everyone, for all your great questions. I'll hold and pause for a few seconds just in case more questions come in. All right. Just want to call your attention once again to check the chat and check the Q&A for some of the answers that may have been typed, meaning they are written in the question and answer. So check out the questions and check out the responses, and also keep your eye on the chat. And so we want to take this time to thank you so much for participating and sharing and asking all the great questions. And now I'd like to bring to the stage our Chicago District's very own John Pagio to discuss the study's next steps. Welcome, John.
Thanks, Akila. So when the study was being scoped out, we wanted to have a local community focus. It's why we reached out to the Wisconsin coastal management program to be not just sponsors but partners in the study, and why we're very grateful for everyone here for giving us your feedback on our shared vision statements. To maintain this local community focus, we included 5 regular study update progress briefings for the public in our study scope. There are 5 throughout the next 5 years of the study. This is also the 8th of the 9 public shared vision meetings. 8 of them were hosted by each of our state partners. And as Kara previously said, we will have an after-hours meeting hosted by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers later this evening at 5:30 Central. Next year, we will be presenting the basin-wide analysis results in 5 public meetings, 1 for every lake. And in summer 2027, we'll have a public meeting for the draft recommendations, followed by an 8-week public review period. So this is a lot to keep track of over a long period of time. So the best way to stay informed with our study is to subscribe to our mailing list, where we will send out periodic updates and notifications about future meetings and website updates to our subscribers. We also have a website that has more information about the study, including the schedule of the remaining shared vision meeting. And once we finalize the shared vision statement, we will post it on the website and alert subscribers on our mailing list. We'll also alert subscribers when the modeling is publicly available, the results of the modeling. And we look forward to seeing you all again in our future public engagement meetings.
Thank you so much, John, and thank you everyone for participating. Again, I'd like to welcome back our project manager, Mike Padilla, as well as Mike Freeze from the state of Wisconsin to provide any final remarks. Welcome. Mike and Mike again.
Yeah, Mike, please feel free to say any final remarks.
Well, I want to thank everybody who attended today. Again, we value your input and comments on this process as we move forward. Very grateful to the work of our colleagues at the Army Corps of Engineers to bring us together, knowing that this is the 8th of 9 meetings that we put together. And again, hopefully won't be your last opportunity to provide comment. And I encourage you to follow along the study and for any purpose that you may have, feel free to reach out to the Coastal Management Program and its staff. We do lots of things and enjoy working with our coastal constituents. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate that. Yeah, folks, we really appreciate your participation today. I just wanted to mention that this presentation is concluded now. The meeting, we finished our presentation, and feel free to sign off now. If you would like to stick around and ask a last-minute question, the team will still be here for a few minutes. But again, the presentation is concluded, and feel free to sign off. Thanks to everybody for your participation. We look forward to further participation as we move forward in the study. And don't forget to subscribe so that we can keep you up to date on further meetings and materials and things like that. Thanks again, and have a great day.